Hello, friends. I'm David Ignatius, a columnist for the Washington Post, and it's an honor for me to be the moderator of today's discussion and to pay tribute to the late Aurora Humanitarian Initiative co-founder and my dear friend, the incomparable Vartan Gregorian, who was an inspiration to us all and a man whose intellectual energy and moral legacy will live on and influence generations of thinkers and scholars. I'm happy to be joined today by 15 extraordinary people: Vartan's fellow Aurora Humanitarian Initiative co-founders, distinguished members of the extraordinary Aurora Prize Selection Committee, and our exceptional Aurora Prize laureates and special friends of Aurora. We have a lot to talk about today, so we'll introduce each speaker in the course of the conversation by using brief video captions to save time for the remarks. Before we proceed, let's watch what is perhaps our most emotional video with Vartan. In 2018, while in Yerevan during the Aurora Prize weekend, we were able to record a very special tribute to our beloved friend.
And now, for all of you, a special surprise that recapitulates the life of a man beloved by all, a life told in chapters by some special friends.
From Tabriz, Iran, to New York City, a poor boy yearning for knowledge, a wandering Armenian who ended up on the society pages of the New York Times. This is the life it has been my privilege to lead.
Now, as I sit in my office under a portrait of Andrew Carnegie, I am given to reflecting on the long voyage that brought me here. In Lebanon, my first mentor, Simon Vartan, the last prime minister of the short-lived First Republic of Armenia, was a surrogate father, teacher, and benevolent benefactor. He became very fond of my wife, Claire, admiring her courage, tenacity, and independence.
Many mentors, friends, and strangers have helped and guided me along the way, as well, of course, as my wife and children.
I had a great empathy for Carnegie and detected some similarities in our backgrounds. We were both boys from poor families. We both knew in our hearts, in our bones, that education would save us and direct us. That, in fact, education is the key to a better life for everyone, no matter who they are or where they are born.
I certainly was proud and felt triumphant that the boy from Tabriz, who was too poor to own his own volumes and was even unable to borrow and rent books, ended up lending millions of books to the people of New York.
A book, to me, is still one of the most extraordinary creation of man, because it is a gift of knowledge. A book contains dreams, ideas, and ideals. It contains notion about reality and utopia, about revolutions, and clue about life and freedom and happiness.
To construct and cherish a library is to invest not only in ourselves, but in future generations. A library is a legacy. A library is a mirror to the past and a window to the future.
Knowledge about the world, both its tangible qualities and its ephemeral mysteries, and about each other, our glories and our follies, is the only way to narrow the great gulfs that divide us.
As a young boy in Tabriz, I had read about the terrible devastations wrought by the Great War, including the deportations, atrocities, and genocides perpetrated against the civilian populations.
One thing is clear. Peace will be rooted in understanding how the differences between us, between states, between peoples and nations cause conflict, and in finding ways to managing those differences instead of letting them explode into hostilities.
Andrew Carnegie himself said that he wanted the philanthropies he had begun to do real and permanent good in this world. I had no money, so I've learned through Carnegie's legacy what is possible to do with money. Give it away. In much the same way I had learned earlier how a boy who had no books could grow up to be a man dedicated to using the resources of many to provide books for millions.
And now, with great emotion from all of us, I want to invite our cherished friend and mentor, Vartan Gregorian, to the stage.
Vartan was a rare man. Today, I want all of us to have the opportunity to reflect on Vartan's thoughts and ideas throughout the years that we've been by his side. As you know, Vartan sat on the boards of numerous foundations and institutions, but the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative is the only organization he co-founded. With this in mind, I propose to kick off our discussion by watching an excerpt from Vartan's very first speech as Aurora Co-Founder, which he gave at the launch of Aurora, known then as 100 Lives Initiative, in New York City on March 10, 2015.
It's most fitting that 100 Lives is being launched from New York. After all, this is the city of Ambassador Henry Morgenthau, who in 1915 alerted the world to the impending destruction of Armenians in the Ottoman Empire. It's also the city whose main newspaper, the New York Times, provided a detailed chronicle of a near annihilation of Armenians more than a century ago. New York is the birthplace of President Teddy Roosevelt, who advocated for war against Germany due to deportations of Belgians and against the Ottoman Empire in reaction to the massacres of Armenians, which he called the greatest crime of the war. New York is a home to the United Nations. It's also home to Human Rights Watch, Human Rights First, organizations dedicated to the prevention of abuses of power and the maintenance of universal human rights. Let me remind you also that the first English edition of Franz Werfel's 40 Days of Musadag was published here in New York in 1934. It was the book that saved the Armenian genocide from benign neglect in Europe and gave the Armenians a literary symbol of survival and renewal. We also know that it was from New York that Near East Relief mobilized the American people, bringing together Catholics, Protestants, and Jews, Democrats and Republicans in a nonpartisan national mobilization effort to rescue the remnants of Armenian people and other victims of World War I. Initially, it aimed to raise $100,000, but succeeded in collecting more than 100 million. It was the largest philanthropic effort in America's history and saved more than 1 million refugees, including some 130,000 orphans. Tonight, we honor the spirit and fortitude of our grandfathers and grandmothers. We also honor the many people of conscience, courage, integrity, indeed decency, who a century ago stepped forward to help Armenians when they were most in need. Thanks to them, the Armenian people survived against terrible odds. As a result, an inherent sense of gratitude lives in the heart of every Armenian. Thus, while the 100 Lives program is about the Armenian genocide centennial, it's not about the genocide alone, but it's about the rebirth of a nation and an enduring belief in the common bonds of humanity.
And now I'd like to turn to Aurora co-founder Nubar Afeyan. Nubar, my friend, we've just heard Vartan explain some key reasons for choosing New York City to launch Aurora. Tell us the behind the scenes story. How did it all start? And how did you, Vartan, and Ruben decide to create Aurora?
Thank you, David. First, let me just say that you see me today with Vartan looking over my shoulder. Over the many years that I knew Vartan, I always felt he was looking over my shoulder, and for that matter, over the shoulder of all those he knew. What was even more impressive, though, was that through his life's work, Vartan also looked over the shoulders of many thousands, if not millions more, most of whom he didn't know. That's how I will always remember this extraordinary man I consider a mentor and a friend, and that's how I wanted to appear to you today on this special occasion. Back in 2015, at the occasion of the centennial of the Armenian genocide, many of us struggled to find meaning and motivation from our collective tragic experience. My contribution to the conception of the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative was based on personal experience, as I am the grandson of genocide survivors. My grandfather Bedros escaped death not once but twice, and it was a kind-hearted stranger, a German officer, who saved him the second time. Growing up hearing that story from my great-aunt Armenuhi made me realize that beyond perpetrators and victims, there were also saviors and survivors. It was that realization that in part inspired us to launch Aurora. Together with Vartan Gregorian and Ruben Vartanian, we co-founded the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative and the Aurora Prize for Awakening Humanity. The very name of our initiative was chosen to honor the memory of Aurora Mardiganian. Forced to witness the atrocities of the Armenian genocide as a child against all odds, she survived and went on to relive the trauma as she told her story to the world stage and in film, raising awareness of the genocide. Our overriding ambition was to find a way of remembering not only the survivors of the Armenian genocide, but also to show gratitude to their saviors, the people whose bravery in the face of such adversity and danger helped save lives and allowed many of us to be here today. To honor those who saved lives of Armenians a century ago, we decided to launch the prize and initiative to find modern day heroes who are doing the same today and in so doing, bring the world's attention to them and their work. Within the short space of the last 5 years, that idea has evolved into a global movement. Vartan often recited a quote from Bertolt Brecht's Galileo, saying, "Curse the land that needs heroes." He reminded us that we should all work to ensure a world in which we would not need them. But he also knew that human nature often created conflict and inequities that could be countered by knowledge and active philanthropy. During an interview he once gave, when asked about what made him so powerful, he said, "I've never been interested in power, but I'm interested in knowledge. And it happens that knowledge is power." The power that comes from knowledge, when shared and applied, was the power Vartan most carefully wielded for the good of mankind. Armenians have managed to overcome the despair of a century ago, and today there's an even more pressing need for the rebirth of a nation that Vartan mentioned in his speech. We have a long way to go and will always need his guidance. While he's no longer with us, fortunately, Vartan occupies many, many shelves in our collective library of memories. We can carry on with the mission he left us by working together to further honor his legacy.
Thank you, Nubar, for sharing your story of Aurora's creation and your special memories of Vartan. I think we all hold in our hearts that vision he had of rebirth and of Aurora's mission of gratitude and action. As you said, Aurora was founded on the premise that there are people risking their lives to save thousands of others amidst humanitarian crises, and that their work needs our full attention and support. Aurora is about giving people a second chance. And when they get that second chance at life, they have to ask themselves what they'll do with it. Their existence becomes more meaningful because they realize that they could have lost it. And they believe that expressing their gratitude by helping others gives them an opportunity to spread life and instill the same sense of gratitude in those they support. Let's watch a recent video of Vartan dedicated to his thoughts on Aurora.
And Aurora is renewal, hope, and gratitude in action. Symbol of hope, action, and transcendence. Transcending boundaries, transcending religion, transcending ideologies, but dealing with the basic, most decent, honest element that human beings are one.
Lord Darzi, our chairman, I'd like to give you the floor now and ask you to reflect on Vartan's words and to share your vision of Aurora's gratitude in action.
Thank you, David. Every time I see that in the first video, tears and the choking sensation, remembering an amazing man. I had the honor of working with Vartan. As to all of us, he was passionate about the cause he supported. He was authentic. He was selfless. He was generous to many, including me. He was poetic. He was romantic. He was a legend. Also, his wit, his infectious smile, and the twinkle in his eyes made him a superb chair. I've learned a lot watching him in action for a number of years. His guiding principle was caring about others. He passionately believed that everyone deserved an opportunity, and we need to give an opportunity to everyone. And that was the spirit that he brought to the Aurora Prize. And that is the spirit that will continue in his memory. Gratitude in action, as we heard from Nubar, is the concept that drives the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative and the Aurora Prize. Countless survivors around the world who owe their second chance to the generosity of others can best acknowledge such a benevolence by taking a similar action. This is gratitude in action, and the impact so far is very impressive. Since the launch of the Aurora Prize in 2015, 5 laureates have been selected who have collectively chosen 15 humanitarian organizations and allocated almost $5 million, thanks to the founders, to them to launch or support 36 projects in 18 countries, benefiting nearly 1 million people. Vartan and Nubar and Ruben created Aurora as a gratitude in action because they want to inspire those who have received aid in times of crises and to express gratitude by offering similar assistance to someone else. And although Vartan is gone, I still feel his spirit, and I don't think he will ever leave us.
Thank you, Lord Darzi, for those thoughts and for your leadership for Aurora. The mission of Aurora's flagship program, the Aurora Prize for Awakening Humanity, is to recognize and support modern-day heroes who risk their own lives, health, or freedom to save the lives, health, or freedom of others suffering as a result of violent conflict, atrocity crimes, or other major human rights violations. These exceptional people are living proof that one individual's efforts can have a tremendous impact. Let's see what Vartan had to say about the heroes honored by Aurora.
When we launched this, we thought we can find a couple of unsung heroes. We have athletes who are heroes, but the anonymous person who do day in, day out, the decent work for humanity are never recognized unless there is a crisis. And I did not know there are so many who qualify to receive Aurora Prize. And the pity is we have one prize to give. So I'm overwhelmed by the success of the enterprise. It touched the top. Now we know how deep the depth is. The title of Aurora Prize was to awaken humanity. My hope is that there will be all other Auroras in other cultures, so that you don't need outsiders to come and discover you.
We join Vartan in saluting these outstanding individuals, and I'm happy that despite technical issues, we have 3 Aurora Prize laureates joining us online. Dr. Tom Katina, connecting from the Nuba Mountains in Sudan. Marguerite Magi Barankitsa is joining from Rwanda, and Mirza Dinai, who is currently on a field trip in Iraq. Unfortunately, our 2018 laureate, Kao Hila Aung from Myanmar, and 2020 laureates, Fartun Adan and Ilwad Elman from Somalia, could not join us today. As you know, the situation in their home countries remains quite unstable, but they're with us in spirit and shared their messages of condolences and support with Aurora earlier. While I have a specific question for Mirza later, I'd like to address Tom and Maggie first and ask them to reflect on Vartan's vision and on the need to have humanitarian heroes today, the need to shed light on their work and to support it with initiatives like Aurora. Dear Dr. Tom, thank you for being with us today. I hope you can hear us and connect. Please share with us your thoughts.
Hi, David. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm happy to say we can.
Okay. Okay, great. It just went out for a minute. So let me try to speak quickly so I get my point across before it goes out again. Thank you so much for this chance to take part in this wonderful tribute to Vartan. You know, I think we all know this history of Vartan, born in Tabriz, and grew up in Tabriz and in different parts of the world, ended up in the. He's a guy who grew up in kind of other cultures, around people of different religions and different beliefs, and I think this really made him the man he was. He's a guy that could really get along with anybody, and I think everybody felt he was their friend. He's one of these few people that you meet in life.
Tom seems to have a problem connecting. I'm hoping he'll come back, but let me turn now to Maggie Barankitsa, thanking Tom for his words. Just to be able to connect with him in Sudan is wonderful. And to thank him for the Vartan Gregorian Health Institute that he's creating. Maggie, it's great to have you among the participants in this event. Your smile always makes me feel that everything's right in the world. Please share with us your sentiments.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it's so hard for me to speak today because for the vision, the message that Vartan gives to the world, it's so deep and so strong. First, that we are not victims. We are the builder of the hope. This was very important. He was a symbol of hope, a symbol of love, of humility, of compassion. When I met him in 2016, when I greet him, and when he looked at me, I was thinking he was orphan. Me also, I was an orphan. And he was a refugee. I was a refugee also. But what he achieved, and when they create Aurora Prize for Awakening Humanity, it changed completely my life. And I am sure that this example is an example for everybody, for the world. When they want to ask me if I must define how to say it, who is Vartan? I said, he's a holy man, he's a saint. He achieved what's written in the whole Bible. I know that now Vartan is looking to us and say, stand up, don't be stupid. I give you my life. I give you for the whole world. When I look to all the laureates, I come from far away, and nobody knows Burundi, but they show those small people to give us the light, to give us, to say, don't be afraid, continue. This vision that we are all one human family, to change our suffering in opportunities. This is the message that Vartan gives us, the heritage of compassion, the heritage, also the joy. When you look to Vartan in his face, he's a father, he's a mother for everybody. Then let us stand up and continue this good example that the love will win. However, now I know I must be in Armenia, but unfortunately the war break and we must stop that. But in my heart, we are the winner because Vartan and his friend Ruben and Nuba, don't worry, he's take care of us because of our faith. The faith of Vartan was to dream a world where everybody, even the small one, are loved. He loved everybody. This is what I can say, but I can't continue because even I am crying. I know now I will never stop because first we were thinking we are mad because if we think that we can change the world in a paradise, he changed the world in a paradise. The humanity is shining of the love of Vartan. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, stand up. And he's among us. He's praying for us. Don't worry, Armenian people, you give us a very big inspiration to the whole humanity. And continue to believe that one day we will become one human family. And he creates, you co-founder of Aurora Pride, a chain, I can say, a chain of human being that we will humanize humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maggie and Dr. Tom, for those very moving words. These are two people who put their faith into practice every day, saving lives and making the world better. Thank you for being with us. One of the key questions that always comes up when people hear about Aurora is whether or not the initiative was launched to encourage other nations to recognize the 1915 Armenian genocide. While Aurora is primarily focused on helping the victims of modern day atrocities, we certainly welcome such recognition as it helps prevent similar tragedies in our time. Let's see what Vartan had to say about this topic.
Aurora's importance is we're not talking abstract. We have a whole century behind us. We don't want Turkey to recognize Armenian for Armenian's sake. We want Turkey to recognize genocide for their own sake. In a sense, to come up with, the way Germans did, as others have done, to come into reconciliation with themselves, their own history. So Aurora, in a sense, represents the case not to forget, but not to forget is not enough. You also have to try to prevent it happening. We've not exhausted ourselves either morally or politically and others. We're a new voice. We're not threat to anyone. We're only threat to those who fear the idea of remembering things. So in a sense, we're strong because we're not talking, again, the same thing, about an abstraction, but rather historical legacy of a nation that has decided now to witness for humanity.
When Vartan was a boy in Tabriz, Iran in the 1930s, people didn't openly discuss the genocide that had happened just 2 decades before. Iran was friendly with Turkey, and so it was not spoken about. Armenians simply talked of commemorating the dead. It may indeed still be a long road ahead for Turkey to accept its grim past, but one nation, I'm happy to say, the United States, has recently made it much harder for anybody to continue ignoring this terrible massacre of Armenian people. It's my pleasure to pass the floor now to Samantha Power, recently appointed USAID Administrator and former member of the Aurora Prize Selection Committee, who's made a significant contribution to the movement, which ultimately led to the official recognition of the Armenian genocide by President Biden on April 24, 2021. Samantha, we thank you again for all your efforts to make this happen. So what does it mean for you personally, for Armenia, and for other nations?
Thank you, David. Thank you for all you've done in your writings over the years to promote Armenian genocide recognition. Thanks to my friends here on the screen in the Aurora community, not only for your humanitarian ideals, but in retrospect, for giving Vartan, in what would prove to be the last years of his life, a most joyful and noble caper to throw himself into. It's really, the loss is immeasurable, but the fact that he had Aurora and the energy that it gave him was incredible. David, I'll come to your question if I could, but I wonder if I might just pay tribute as well just to my hero, friend, and co-conspirator who strode so large on the earth and who shone so bright. You can see it in the videos, that I believe his spirit is going to be with us forever. So I went back over his biography a little bit, which I'd read when it first came out, but just to think about where that determination on Armenian genocide recognition, the determination on Aurora came from. And when you get to know him, it's so easy to forget that when he first touched down in New York back in 1956, he barely could speak the language. He wrote back to his family that he felt so insignificant that he felt, quote, like an ant. Can you imagine Vartan feeling that way, given, again, who he was inside, what he would go on to achieve? When he wandered into the New York Public Library, he liked to always tell the story. He was so incredulous that this treasure trove could be free and open to the public that he was sure he was trespassing, and he quickly hustled outside, afraid he was going to get caught, right? That Vartan Gregorian, that young man, and this kind of rags to impact story, Vartan's story is so well known to us. His own courage, his own fortitude, his own resilience are so self-evident. He is the embodiment of a self-made American man. But for any of us who had the privilege of hearing Vartan tell his own story, you would think that he had almost nothing to do with it. His story was always a story about the kindness and generosity of others, about those who took a chance on him, those who loaned him a buck, those who saw something in him that he didn't yet see in himself. And I think that is so thoroughly the spirit of the Aurora Prize he helped build. Gratitude in action. Again, we know he never forgot where he came from. even though his grandmother had told him growing up never to share family secrets. She would say that the reason houses have four walls is to keep all information inside. He told his family's story, and I think it was a tribute to her, to his grandmother, but also to the land that he came from, and to all those kindnesses that he was shown along the way. David, to your question, I did come to know Vartan through the cause of pursuing Armenian genocide recognition. I spent 5 years writing a book that detailed, among other genocides, the Armenian genocide. This was a book that was turned down by every major New York publisher, but that eventually found a small home and came into print. And I don't remember today how the book, for which even my immediate family members had very low expectations, I don't remember how it found its way into Vartan's hands, because it had a very limited distribution initially. But I will never forget the telephone call. I remember like it was yesterday that I received from him, and it went something like this: Samantha, my name is Vartan Gregorian, and I am buying hundreds of copies of your book. I'm sending them to every member of Congress. They must learn. That was it. That was my first introduction. This person calling me up, telling me he was doing this and had this ambition for Armenian genocide recognition, and thought that, you know, this little book, or thick book, but might make some contribution. I raised skepticism in that first call as to whether any members of Congress would see fit to read a 500-page book on genocide. You know what his response was? That doesn't matter. They can pretend. Over the years, he pushed this boulder of Armenian genocide recognition up many hills, only to find it sadly roll back down. And I have no doubt that when President Biden finally recognized the Armenian genocide a few short days after Vartan passed away, that he breathed a deep sigh of relief, because I think it was really as much about relief as anything up there in heaven. Vartan, of course, was not only about the place he left as a little boy, or about what happened to his family and his ancestors. He was so much about building America. He had an only in America sense of his own story. And that's why he did so much to support first-generation immigrants, giving them educational opportunities, promoting naturalization, directing millions in funding to help refugees and immigrants at home and abroad. Why at every institution he worked, he got to know people that presidents and provosts and deans would not naturally interact with. He famously drank bourbon in the basement of the New York Public Library with the custodians, so as to learn more about the structural problems of the building. He named a whole building at Brown University, for a worker who had served the institution for 45 years. Instead of donors, a worker. It's why he celebrated what he called the foot soldiers of civilization, America's teachers, and invested so much in literacy, STEM training, access to higher education. And I think this only in America spirit must have been what caused his sons to see fit on one of his birthdays to take him to a concert by the one and only great American Bruce Springsteen. Though, as he reflected afterwards, my sons spent more time watching my reaction to the concert than they did watching Bruce Springsteen. Vartan was a mischievous and marvelous storyteller. And often, as I alluded to earlier, he told stories about his own personal heroes. As he put it, I wanted people to know that life is not all cynical, that there are kind, wonderful people who do good things, help other people out of a sense of humanity, charity, religious obligation, ethnic pride, whatever. There was one kind, wonderful person who loomed largest of all, and that was Vartan, and I miss him so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samantha, Madam Administrator, for those very personal, vivid remarks. They bring Vartan to life as you speak and describe your friendship with him. We have one more video segment with Vartan reflecting on the key principles of Aurora. Let's hear him talking about the cycle of giving, gratitude, and generosity, the closing ceremony of the 2019 Aurora Prize weekend in Yerevan.
However, the cycle of giving, which Aurora began, will continue because it is supported by all of you and thousands of more people around the world. Our gratitude in action does not have a deadline. Remember that, I'll repeat again. Our gratitude in action does not have a deadline. These have been fantastic few days, especially tonight's concert, which honor those who have opened their hearts to the world. I'm absolutely sure that after tonight, nobody would remain indifferent to the suffering of other human beings. After all, we are part of one humanity and one mankind, and generosity has no expiration date.
No deadline, Vartan, we promise. I'd like to call now on former President of Mexico, Ernesto Zedillo. Ernesto, thank you for joining this talk. What do you think of Vartan's words? And in your opinion, what needs to be done now so that gratitude and generosity truly become universal values?
Well, I should start by expressing my gratitude to be part of this tribute to our very dear friend. Thanks for making me part of that. And also saying that when I try to distinguish one element of Vartan's interaction with the world, with humanity, with the people he had contact throughout his life, the common element was generosity. And I think that was that generosity what led him to such incredible achievements. And generosity means love, and the love with which he did everything, I think made it possible to see what he achieved. Vartan was admirable because he could make in every person extract the best of them. I saw him so many times talking to people, convincing to think something, to believe something, to give something. And I would see sometimes people who will be hard, skeptical to begin with, and after a few minutes, that person will be different, because Vartan always had the words, the smile, the kindness, the generosity to extract the best of every person. And I think that explains what he achieved as a scholar, as an educator, as leader of the public library in New York, as leader of Carnegie, and of course, as leader, along with our friends Nubar and Ruben of Aurora. So Vartan's life was extraordinary, but I would say common denominator was generosity. I truly feel lucky to have known, to have heard, and I should say to have embraced that great Armenian, that great Lebanese, that great Iranian, that great American that Vartan Gregorian was. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernesto. Before proceeding to our next chapter, I want to share with you a video message from another selection committee member, Paul Pullman, who couldn't join us live today. I'd like to note also that honorary co-chair Benjamin Ferentz and honorary members of the selection committee, Gareth Evans and Oscar Arias, have also shared their messages of sympathy earlier.
Whilst we are mourning the unexpected and too early loss of Vartan, it is also a wonderful moment to celebrate his life and what he stood for. We are blessed that he came into ours. Seldom do you meet someone who has such an immediate impact on you, such wisdom, moral strength, and inner compass, totally at peace with himself. We first met in Yerevan and later as members of the Aurora Prize Selection Committee. Vartan had an amazing way to share his deep knowledge and discussing the tougher issues, weaving in historic perspectives, wisdoms, values, and fresh thoughts. It was always hard to disagree with him as he nudged us along. He always conveyed his ideas with calm, empathy, and compassion. We certainly have lost a great humanitarian, one of the rare ones who, despite his age, touched all generations. One who believed in the power of people and a world free from conflict, persecution, and always fighting for the too many still left behind. We just celebrated Easter, which is also a new beginning, and as the saying goes, to live in hearts we leave behind is not to die. Vartan, you are in our hearts. Thank you and rest in peace.
Thank you, Paul, for speaking of Vartan so movingly. Over the years, we had the unique pleasure of knowing and enjoying Vartan's company as a great thinker and visionary. In the next section of our event, I want to recall Vartan's thoughts on some of the topics closest to his heart: education, religion, the importance of peaceful coexistence, and politics. At one of the Aurora Dialogue events, Vartan was asked what frustrated him most as an historian. Having had an illustrious academic career and after that numerous appointments culminating in the position of the first foreign-born president of Brown University with more than 70 honorary degrees from the world's most renowned schools, in his answer, Vartan stressed the importance of learning and knowing more. Let's watch.
I'm very frustrated because the past is nothing of any utility at all. We live in the present, we deal with present issues, present crises. We're victim of presentism. We take a present question and then trace back, where did it begin? Where is Uganda? Who created Uganda? Can you tell me where was last war, last famine, and so forth? Rather than seeing the advent of Uganda, advent of Kenya. Or we discuss religion. Not too many people know about religion, what they read in the paper. When I ask how many of you read the Quran, one of two, three maybe. How many have read Bible? Many, but only one chapter. And even presidential candidate Donald Trump said, 2 Corinthians. He thought it was a book, 2 books, rather than Corinthians, letter to Corinthians. We always talk of religion, but we don't know about religion. My frustration is presentism. Many people are not educated, and I tell you, not only sometimes journalists, but most of the time even historians, because we live in the age, and political scientists, economists, we live in the age of specialization, further fragmentation. So knowledge has been fragmented to such a state, we're turning out to a society of specialists doing specialized knowledge for specialized interests of a specialized society. So to be generalist, to be accepted and respected means, first you have to become full professor, have published eminent books, then like my former professor, William Langer of Harvard, who was the great diplomatic historian, teach a course at Stanford, The History of Potatoes. Or another one, very good book, well, I learned more from that than anything else. Another one, the important history of the horseshoe that revolutionized warfare. I did not know that Mongols succeeded because they used horseshoe, unlike others. Horses and ponies did not get. This kind of knowledge may be pedantic, but it's essential to understand how things have evolved. We unfortunately don't teach even geography. Hence there are movies when they say, where am I? It's Tuesday, it must be Belgium. I flew over 10 countries. I don't know where I am. Geography was eliminated from schools. Languages now are being eliminated from schools because after all, as the Dutchman said, everybody knows English. So why bother teach us? I was trying to teach Dutch history at the University of Pennsylvania. And he said, well, everybody knows English. Why are you studying our country? Because it's important. History of commerce, history of imperialism, to know how Dutch did it.
Presentism and specialization were Vartan's enemies. Stanford and all his other achievements might not have happened if it weren't for the director of the Collège Arménien in Beirut. Vartan promised to return there to teach after obtaining his bachelor's degrees from Columbia. And when he did keep his promise and came back for a year to teach geography, his mentor told him, "You were a small fish in a big pond, but now you're a big fish in a small pond." This helped Vartan to realize that he had to shoot higher. I now turn to my friend Mary Robinson, former president of Ireland. Mary, thank you for joining our tribute to Vartan today. Vartan reminds us that in the current fast-paced environment, fundamental things can seem to change overnight. How can we cope with this presentism and replace it with a vision that's universal and lasting?
Thank you, David. I will come back to presentism, but like all the other speakers, I want, first of all, almost emotionally feeling it necessary to speak of my love for Vartan and also my husband, Nick's love for Vartan. We first met him when he was president of Brown University and I was invited to accept an honorary degree. And from the beginning, we absolutely were enchanted with this incredible president of the university, his humor, his knowledge, etc. And when I worked from New York for 8 years with a small organization called Realizing Rights, we had a lot of long discussions about human rights in the best possible context, meaning in a nice nice restaurant with his wife Claire and Nick and myself, the four of us, and we would, talk about human rights, talk about all kinds of issues, but also have a delicious meal. And I tried several times to pay. And he explained to me, no, you can't pay, Mary, because I'm helping you a little bit with your realizing rights. And it would be a kind of corruption if you were to pay me. I don't know how he worked that out or what the logic was, but that was, that was the way he dealt with it. And I want to come then to, that idea of presentism, that you introduce present day ideas and perspectives into depictions of the past because you have a very shallow knowledge of them. That was completely the opposite to our dear friend Vartan. He had a moral passion and he also had a deep historical perspective on so many issues, as you've already heard. And I think he thought of himself as being sort of objective, of being apolitical to get the facts out rather than an opinion. But his opinions came through his passion and his keen interest in human rights. I very much agree with what Samantha said about how he championed immigrants and wanted them to be integrated as full citizens, and how much that meant to him. I want to gift you with probably Vartan's last conversation on video. Some of you may know of it, but probably most of you don't. It was shortly before his death. He supported the library in Trinity College, as under his stewardship over those many years, the Carnegie had supported, I think, let me have a figure, yes, $75 million worth to libraries around the world. And a recent gift was to Trinity College in Dublin. And the very good librarian in Trinity, Helen Shelton, who had visited Vartan in New York, I had introduced them, wanted to launch the Trinity Virtual Library and invited Vartan to be in conversation with her. And it's a wonderful conversation because it's very relaxed. It's very, it roams all over the place, which is the way Vartan always was, but it's full of lovely insights. And if you go into the Trinity College Library website, you can easily find that recording because it's the launch of the virtual Trinity Library, and it was on the 4th of March, 2021. He died on the 15th of April, so just over a month before Vartan's death, and he sounded great. He sounded really, very, very good. And so I think what I wanted to really conclude with is my sense from all of us who were involved with him and with Ruben and Nuber on the Aurora Prize for Awakening Humanity was, it was Vartan's moral compass that drove the extraordinary values in that prize and the extraordinary sense that gratitude in action has no limits. And I too remember, and Nick remembers very well, that sentence that he stood up and thanked the library in that speech. And you've seen, we heard a record of it earlier. And he said, "Let us remember, generosity has no expiration date." Nick and I went home and we constantly repeated that because there was something very special about it. I think the way we've been able to find those wonderful prize winners is because of the depth of thought that has gone into and the values that have gone into the Aurora Prize. And I, like you all, I'm very proud to be associated with it. I miss Vartan dearly. You know, we've all expressed our love. He was, I used to tease him actually that he liked me, but he seemed to love my husband, Nick. It kind of annoyed me that he almost seemed to love Nick more than he liked me. You know, I don't know how to put that, but it doesn't always happen. And it was kind of, it was a way of expressing back his affection by acknowledging how he cut through in an extraordinary way to every individual, as each of us have expressed. Thank you.
So we thank you, Mary, for sharing that gift. We thank you for sharing that gift. We will try to get to the Trinity College archives and watch that last footage of Vartan, which sounds very moving. As a generalist, Vartan always stressed the need to know more about the world's religions. He was positive that this knowledge would be helpful in shifting from presentism, this focus on today and not past or future, towards more profound holistic thinking. I'm reminded of a very emotional moment of Vartan's speech at the 2017 Aurora Prize ceremony in Yerevan. Let's watch that now.
I wrote a speech and read it, but it was not me. So I decided to put the speech in my pocket and speak from my heart. The other day, American University of Beirut, I quoted Brecht's Life of Galileo, in which there is a famous line, "Cursed be the land that needs heroes," because we become so depraved that few are exceptional, but those few lift us up, but still do not allow us to cope with our depravity. Nietzsche said, if God is dead, everything is possible. If shame is gone, everything possible. If decency is gone, everything possible. So you saw that. I'm very emotional because I grew up in Tabriz where you did not hit a woman, where you did not kill a child, where you did not hit an elderly, you did not hit a cripple. Life was sacred. All Abrahamic faiths taught dignity of religion, dignity of man. And now we have made an exception and murdered on the altar of ultranationalism, sacrificing ethnic groups, sacrificing women, sacrificing ethnic groups, nations, because people would like to have perfect system for their own. That's what worries me.
I would now like to introduce a friend from Iran, the land of Vartan's birth, Nobel Prize laureate Shireen Ebadi. Shireen, thank you for joining us. As someone who has firsthand experience of religious tensions affecting the lives of millions of people, now that this issue is more prominent than ever around the world, what steps need to be taken to achieve peaceful coexistence, the dream we all have?
In memory of beloved Vartan, who was born in Iran and lived in that country until the age of 12, I would like to begin my speech with an ancient Persian tale. God was in the seventh heaven, and the truth was a mirror in his hands. Suddenly, that mirror fell and broke into 1,000 pieces, and each piece went into a different house. Every faith and religion holds a piece of that mirror. Different religions are not in conflict with each other. Why? Because the essence and purpose of them is the belief in humanity. They refer to that humanity in different languages, and they believe that it can be achieved through love and self-sacrifice. If a group spreads hatred in the name of religion or ideology and considers violence permissible, be certain that they have made a mistake and they've gone astray. Examples include groups such as Daesh, ISIS, which have used Islam as a shield to cover up their heinous crimes. The important point is that such groups which use religion or ideology as a shield for their violence, they're exploiting the ignorance of the people. They're attempting to attract the youth, in particular, through widespread propaganda. The most effective weapon to confront such groups with is knowledge, which explains why in the likes of Taliban and ISIS originate in countries with high levels of illiteracy. Also, there is a principle in psychology which says that we fear the unknown, and that fear causes anxiety, leading to hatred and xenophobia. To coexist peacefully, we must become acquainted with one another's beliefs and religions. That's the only way we could ensure peaceful coexistence and cooperation among different religions and different ethnic groups. I would once again like to remember and pay tribute to the beloved Professor Vartan Gregorian, my mentor. Remember his tireless efforts aimed at spreading knowledge, thanks to which he paved the way for peaceful coexistence. He's left behind invaluable books and works. And let us not forget the countless talented young people across the globe who would not have made it to university and higher education without his generous and selfless support and vision. He urged us to continue his path. And I very much hope that others, especially the young generation and everyone who listened to Vartan, to continue on his path. I urge the world to do that. Thank you.
Shireen, thank you for your insights. We're all praying for peace these days. We all hope for more tolerance in the world, peaceful talks and negotiations by means of words, not missiles, to resolve issues. Let's listen to Vartan talking about coexistence. In his remarks at the Matanandaran, the Armenian National Repository of Manuscripts, where Aurora Dialogues were held in 2016.
We meet here not because this is a very sacred place for Armenians, because you have 17,000 manuscripts here, collected each one by love
tradition here, they're not all about Armenian manuscripts. Armenians have saved Turkish manuscripts, Iranian manuscripts, Russian manuscripts, Yazidi manuscripts, everything. In a sense, this is a place of coexistence. And if all these books can live side by side, bringing heritage of all these countries together, why not project the same kind of coexistence in terms of mutual interest in the region and others?
It's a wonderful Vartan moment. If these books can live side by side from so many different cultures, why can't we? On this topic of peace, I'd like to ask the 2019 Aurora Prize laureate, Mirza Dinai, to say a few words about the multifunctional community called the House of Coexistence that his designated organization, Airbridge Iraq, is building in Iraq using Aurora Prize funds. Mirza.
Thank you very much, dear David. Before I start to speak about the Coexistence House, I wanted to tell you when I remember Vartan, I say a single Armenian mother, which was survivor of Armenian genocide, brought this great man and hero to the world as a gift for all the humanitarian family over all the world. So we should also spread this this ideology of humanism, of peace, of coexistence to the world. For me, as one of the survivors of the Yazidi genocide that came 99 years after Armenian genocide, it was an honor to be chosen by Vartan and his colleagues from the selection committee to get the Aurora Prize in 2019. And therefore, I wanted to put the 50% of Aurora Prize on a project called Coexistence House in Sinjar, which is actually a building, a multifunctional building that will be the base of coexistence and cultural. And we decided also after the passaway of Vartan to choose one of the rooms to put it as a small library and name it after Vartan. But coming back to the sadful situation of the Yazidi community, I am just coming back from one of the Yazidi survivors as Yazidi IDP or refugee camps. It had yesterday, unfortunately, an accident, a fire accident that caused the burning of more than 400 tents of Yazidi families, and more than 1,000 people were actually are actually homeless now. After 7 years almost of the challenging for the Yazidi, who are now 80% of the community are still IDPs, cannot return back to the region Sinjar. We wanted actually to bring the hope and peace to the region. So the project is actually is a multifunctional, about 1,200 square meter on 3-level building. We started actually in October 2020 to build the house, and it's supposed to be finished by July or August, and we are planning to open it for all the facilities. It will be also a green park of coexistence where we bring the symbols of all religions and ethnicities in Iraq, in the region, in Middle East, like Yazidis, Muslims, Jews, Christian, Baha'i, Mandai, and Kakai. We will bring all these symbols in the place, and it will give the advantages, some advantage to the stakeholders to use these facilities for the training, for the therapy, as a care unit. It will be an amphitheater for event center, and it will be a platform of cooperation between national and local NGOs as establishment of humanitarian sector, civil society, and networking pool to work. We are actually now, you see some pictures of the project. We are almost finished with more than 70% of the building, and we hope that we can finish it by August. And we will kindly also invite all of you to participate when we go to open this coexistence center. So this is the gratitude in action. We wanted to spread this soul of Vartan and all the idea behind Aurora Prize to put it in some places where the genocide survivor can also take benefit from that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mirza. When we think of the suffering of the Yazidi people and we see the project that you have started to speak to the survivors and to embody this spirit of gratitude in action, it's powerful for all of us. Thank you very much. Today's discussion in many ways revolves around the notion of hope. As human beings, we greet each sunrise with new aspirations. And Vartan gave a wonderful speech about this on a magnificent morning in Khor-Virap in 2018 in Armenia. Let's have a look.
For thousands of years, there has always been sunrise, not only here, but around the world. There has always been good day anticipated with every sunrise. But most important thing for us here, bringing symbolic unity of three traditions to Armenians. One was before Christianity, when we worshiped the light and fire, along with Zoroastrians and others. Second is with Christianity, when we celebrated eternity and suffering as a way of redemption to heaven, and redemption, Golgotha, having a cause and a meaning. And the third one, most important, resurrection. And you saw the transformation in the back, how from the fires and others came calm, and with calm came light. People all over the world, when there is a light, we say good morning. Armenians say bariluz, good light. And that has been traditionally our hope, that one day we'll have good light, not for every day, for some time, in order to reconstitute ourselves the nation we were.
Good light, an unforgettable sight and a beautiful message. My next questions I'd like to direct to Lema Bowie and John Prendergast. Lema, thank you for being with us today. With the ongoing pandemic devastating nations around the globe with never-ending conflicts, is there any hope for the human race? And what pragmatic day-to-day action do you think could be taken to help create and control positive change? Lema.
Thank you, David. There's definitely hope. I am an internal optimist. I never ever think that there's not hope in the world that we live in, because not having hope is not having life. What the pandemic has taught each and every one of us is that we're interrelated and interconnected and codependent in ways that we never imagined. Today in our world, having spent 10 months, 9 months, 12 months in lockdown, if every one of us having realized, it's important for us to note that it's not just the big things. Yes, the policies and the millions and trillions of dollars that goes into humanitarian work are important. But what is also important is an understanding of our collective humanity, offering bread to that person on the street, offering a place to sleep to that person, giving hope, sharing kindness. And I think these are things that will continue to inspire hope through the way we interact with people. I've sat and listened to everyone talk about Vartan. I knew Vartan for 6 short years, and in my mind, it's like a lifetime. I'm still struggling to process his death. But if you permit me to talk about 2 quick examples of how he really helped me reinforce this whole feeling that the little things that we do with each other matters a lot and give hope. When I joined the Aurora board, one of the few times I flew into New York, I flew in with my daughter, who was about 6 at the time. It was a very cold morning in New York and she wasn't well. So we had to go outside to get something. We were standing at the corner of Broadway and 34th Street after we had gotten her medication, waiting for a taxi. The next day was board meeting. I walked into the Carnegie board place with the board meeting, and Vartan walked over to me and said, "Were you in New York on 34 and Broadway yesterday with a little child?" And I said, "Yes, it was my daughter who went to get medication." I did not expect his reaction afterwards. With tears in his eyes, he looked at me and said, "Why didn't you call me?" I didn't want to believe it was you because no one told me you had arrived. Promise me that if you ever come to New York and there's a problem, you will call me first. And I said, "I promise." Second example, I was planning a project and a group of very powerful individuals, and I went to seek Vartan's advice. He looked them straight in the eye and said, "I'm not going to support this project because I believe you all want to use this young lady." When the meeting ended, he called me, pulled me on the side and said, "Promise me another thing, that you would never get involved in any venture with any group in New York without consulting with me." Vartan was someone who showed me in those very short 6 years that indeed remaining indifferent to the suffering of others was not something that he did. Even if he knew that you could afford, even if he knew that you had something, he treated you like you matter. He treated everyone like they matter. And I think in a world where everything has turned upside down, what is important for all of us is to walk in that spirit of our collective humanity that he showed us, that we can change the world by doing billions, by giving billions and millions, but we can also change the world through our everyday interactions with people. Thank you.
Thank you, Lema, for those two beautiful stories. John Prendergast, thank you for participating in this tribute as well. At the Sentry, the investigative organization you co-founded together with George Clooney, you track down war criminals and profiteers by following their dirty money. How do Vartan's words relate to you? How do you manage to not lose hope while facing the worst of human greed on a daily basis? Where do you find your inspiration and strength? John.
Thank you, David, and a warm greeting to all of our dear friends here on this solemn yet hope-filled occasion, in particular as co-founders Nubar and Ruben. Our beloved friend and mentor Vartan has been gone a while now, but like everyone, I'm still processing what it feels like to live in a world without him. He was a brilliant shining light for all of us to follow, and he made everyone feel special, from world leaders to waiters. And every time he spoke, I learned. He never stopped dreaming and innovating. And on this issue of hope and inspiration, David, because we were so united in our efforts to expose and confront and commemorate genocides from Armenia a century ago to present-day Ethiopia, Vartan and I talked a lot about how not to lose hope. For me, that hope comes primarily in the form of success stories. When I was a young person, like many here, I was involved in the global anti-apartheid movement, led by South Africans, which eventually dismantled that racist state structure. Years later, as I worked with President Mandela on the Burundi peace process, he would tell us about how those global efforts, the students and others who would rally and demonstrate and boycott and even get arrested for the cause, how those efforts gave him hope during those long years in Robben Island prison. And I was filled with wonder looking back. We all thought our efforts, as small as they were probably in vain. But here was Nelson Mandela telling us they mattered and that they were all part of a calculus for change. Another story that gives me hope is a narrative that our friend Lema could tell much more authoritatively, but she was on the front lines of yet another global movement for change that had its manifestation around the world in the form of the anti-blood diamonds movement. Lema and her colleagues drove the change on the ground in Liberia with their courageous stands. But there was also a cadre of compassionate people all around the world who had never been to Liberia or Sierra Leone, who often Mostly had never even met a Liberian, but they believed what was happening was wrong, and they believed in a better future and were willing to give themselves to that cause. This is all about a concept of believing things you haven't seen, as Brian Stevenson would say, which has its roots in the Bible and other sacred texts. I think Vartan epitomized this. He believed in things most of us could not yet see, and he worked to make them happen. As Vartan said in the video we just saw, the concept of Barlus, good light, was very important to him. I think he saw that phrase as meaning something like living in hope for a better future. Vartan was eminently pragmatic in impacting the present, surely, but he was transcendent in his ability to live in hope for a better future and then working to see that better future come to pass. Vartan had a life of profound impact in countless sectors and locales. He had an unmatched life, one of one. I looked up his name and it means rose. That is so fitting in so many ways, as his radiant red heart, driven by love, will forever live in ours. Thank you.
Thank you, John and Lema, for those wise words. Radiant red heart is a phrase that's going to stick in my mind. Vartan always said that he loved being a public servant. One of the things he mentioned in relation to his Carnegie appointment was that it was a completely new challenge to him. Before, he'd always been looking for funding, and now it was him allocating funds to others. Let's watch Vartan reflect on how with wealth comes responsibility, why philanthropy is different from and more important than charity, and what constitutes the DNA of a civilization.
One of the things I loved about Andrew Carnegie, the whole idea that with wealth comes responsibility, and wealth is not yours necessarily. You have to reinvest in public. This is a revolutionary idea when he wrote The Gospel of Wealth. It was not popular at the time. But now I'm seeing that his philosophy is being shared by many multimillionaires, billionaires, who pledge to give half of their wealth while they're alive, and most of the others charity. I don't see it should be charity. I believe it should be reinvested. Investment rather than charity, to build. You invest in order to build. And that's one of the things I think has impressed me. And also we have to try to inculcate among Armenians and all the other traditional societies who are used to charity. In the Sunday, Friday, more mosque, Sunday for Christians, Saturday for Jews, you give in a synagogue, that's fine, that's charity. But we have to go beyond that into philanthropy, building future for next generations, not to alleviate the pain, but try to cure the cause of the pain. And that's one of the things that has to be massive rethinking now for many traditional societies, because every Abrahamic faith asks for you to give charity. Charity is fine. Charity comes out of a sense of pity. Philanthropy comes out of a sense of building institutions, but also prototypes that states cannot afford. Governments cannot afford to agree that we're building, we don't know if we'll succeed or not. Philanthropy can provide models and demonstrate that they work. And that's another important thing to teach new generation. That you're wealthy, fine, but wealthy is, unfortunately, as somebody told me, shrouds have no pockets. You cannot take it with you. So you have to reinvest here. And that's another thing Armenians have to learn. They're very generous for charity, but they should be generous for philanthropy. Build institutions, build human progress for future of human beings, build universities, build colleges, everything, because in my book, universities and museums and libraries constitute DNA of our civilization. So it's wonderful to invest in the DNA of our civilization. And that's what is great challenge, not for us, also for all traditional societies, whether India or Pakistan and so forth. You give for religious reason, or other Europeans resist giving, say, well, it's government's function. We pay taxes, the taxes take care of it. That's missing the point. Why should you have $30, $40 billion? And to do what afterwards? Give to your children? How about if you don't have children? To the monuments? Monuments come and go. You have to invest in living institutions, living, breathing, building institutions.
We have one more special guest with us today, Deanna Arsenyan, Aurora Creative Council member and a longtime associate and supporter of Vartan at the Carnegie Corporation of New York. Deanna, thanks for joining us. Since you spent more time at Vartan's side than perhaps all of us combined, I want to shake things up a little and ask you a completely different question. What's your most memorable Vartan Gregorian moment, and what piece of his advice or wisdom will you be carrying in your heart forever? Deanna.
Thank you, David. I just also wanted to say at the very beginning that this was just a wonderful event, a wonderful tribute. And I'm so deeply touched by all the comments because they really show how multidimensional Vartan was. He left such an impact on so many around the world, including those on this webinar today, and in so many different ways. David asked you two questions to me. They're really kind of unfair because you're asking me to compress my 30-year relationship with a person who can only be described as force of nature into one moment, and his library worth of wisdoms into a single phrase. But let me try. Since this is an event related to Aurora Humanitarian Initiative, which is rooted in Armenia, I'm digging into my Armenia travel memories with Vartan, and I see the following picture that stands out among the countless. This was during our trip to Yerevan for the first Aurora Prize event. Now, Vartan hadn't been to Armenia for a while, and understandably was in great demand during his visit. He was booked solid for meetings, interviews, media appearances. So on one of these super busy days, he had a brief break, and we went for a walk to get a bit of sunshine and respite from the events. And as we were walking through a park, he saw two little kids at some distance. Next thing I know, he's heading towards the kids, and by the time I catch up with him, he's engaged in a conversation with 5-year-olds. I was so touched that I took a picture of the moment, which became my favorite photo of Vartan. And here it is. Can we show the picture? Okay, the picture, so. Now, why this moment? Because it depicts Vartan away from the limelight and the public figure that he was. It shows his warm and fuzzy inner personality, his love of life, and his ability to enjoy small moments, even if pressured by big ones. As to Vartan's words of wisdom that I carry in my heart, there are so many that they deserve a published anthology. And each and every one of them is precious and meaningful, as so many of you have said today. I recommend to those who are interested to check out Carnegie Corporation's website, carnegie.org, where our communications department assembled a lot of material about and by Vartan. But in connecting the dots between the kids and his words of wisdom, this one stands out to me. It is from a commencement address he gave to Stanford University in 2006. And I just quote a tiny little piece of it. So Vartan said, "Well, today I would like to remind you of your connection to history. Try to listen with your inner ears to those who went before you, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and on, who all wanted to be good ancestors to you. As a historian, educator, and a fellow student, I feel bound to remind you that the time has come for you to return the favor. You have to learn to be good ancestors to the future." I think this particular call of Vartan's reflects Aurora's spirit and its very essence. It is very close to my own heart because as an American Armenian, I'm mindful of my Armenian ancestors and, like Vartan, equally cherish my hyphenated identity. Again, I want to thank you and Aurora Co-Founders for an opportunity to share my Vartan Gregorian moments. Thank you.
Thank you, Deanna, for sharing your stories with us today. We'll try to be good ancestors, as Vartan urged us to be. I have another Vartan story for you that shows that he never lost his humility, even as his fame grew. Throughout his life, Vartan received the highest honors from 4 U.S. presidents. President George H.W. Bush appointed him to the Fulbright Commission. President Clinton awarded Vartan the National Humanities Medal. President George W. Bush awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is the highest award for civilians in the United States. And President Obama appointed Vartan to the Commission on White House Fellowships. While being genuinely grateful for these merits, Vartan said he received the biggest satisfaction when he learned that at the petition of a local community, an elementary school at Fox Point, Providence was named after him. When visiting the school years later, a little girl there asked Vartan, "How come you've named yourself after our school?" And that was the nicest thing anybody has told me, Vartan used to say. Our discussion about Vartan is nearly at an end, but before proceeding to the closing remarks, I invite you to watch a video recorded by our friend and honorary co-chair of the Aurora Prize Selection Committee, George Clooney, ahead of the Aurora 5th anniversary ceremony, which was held last October in the New York Public Library.
Hi. Well, I'm sorry we all can't be together tonight. These are unusual times, particularly unusual for the people of Armenia. And we hope and pray for peace as quickly and as soon as possible. It is foremost on all of our minds. It has been an honor for me to have been, from the very beginning, part of this Aurora Prize with Elie Wiesel, the late, great Elie. The Aurora Prize, first and foremost, I cannot congratulate them enough for the hard work they do and for the money that they use to help bring attention and to actually help some of the laureates, some of the people who've actually been awarded these prizes, and to the people who have been awarded these prizes. They are the best of us. They stand out. They risk their lives. They make the world better. Speaking of making the world better, Vartan, there at the New York Public Library. Vartan is the best, truly the best of us. He's who I want to grow up and be. He is kind, and he is compassionate, and he works every day to help bring peace to everyone, not just to Armenia. So I'm hoping that somewhere in the near future, there is no need for an Aurora Prize. That would be my prayer. That would be my hope. Thank you all. Thank you for everyone's involvement. And we'll see you soon, hopefully in a room together. Bye.
Beautiful message from George and a sentiment that we all share. I want to say a few words of my own about Vartan before we leave. He was a brilliant man, as we've discussed, but he never thought he was more important than the world around him. He had an intense curiosity and a breadth of knowledge that took him from Iran to Lebanon, America, Armenia, and the whole world. His friend Kareem Sajidpour of the Carnegie Endowment for Peace in Washington described him to me once as the last cosmopolitan. Armenians hold him dear, but we also know that he was a citizen of the world who embodied the values that make us, at our best, civilized men and women. Books were central to Vartan's life and story, and his romance with books started when he was a schoolboy in Tabriz, Iran, volunteering at an Armenian library. He'd read every night as if there was nothing better to do. And that was Vartan's way in the beginning to travel the world in his dreams. Many years later, Vartan was hired to save the most iconic library in the world, the New York Public Library. Last October, when hosting the virtual Aurora ceremony that was broadcast live from the New York Public Library, Vartan said it was perhaps the most democratic institution in the world, providing free access to anybody who wanted to learn. He said that it helped us to chart out where we were coming from in order to know where we were going. So as we say goodbye to Vartan, let's watch not one, but two videos showcasing his passion for books.
I want to use 5 minutes of your time to tell you a story of one boy who used to get a good education many years ago, then became an educator by himself and gave opportunities to thousands of people. His name is Vartan Gregorian. From this day on, the UWC Dilijan Library will be named the Vartan Gregorian Learning Center.
Thank you for the library. Now you give me an excuse, all the books that I'm sending to you have a location that I always tell my students, everyone, that I said you're a unique moment in the history of creation. Nobody like you is going to come again. I'm happy to be a librarian. Librarian was not ended. Education has not ended. For the first time in world history, every individual has capacity to have their own Library of Alexandria. It's no longer confined to the pharaohs. Everybody can have it. So we have the risk to learn. And in recent commencement address, I took this instrument. I said, this is iPhone. Guess what? Entire Greek language is here, literature. But you still have to read it. Otherwise, the knowledge, storage business rather than knowledge business. Thank you very much.
With this, I'd like to pass the floor to Vartan's fellow Aurora co-founder, my friend Ruben Vardanyan, for closing remarks.
Thank you, David. You have been with Aurora for the past several years, acting as a master of the ceremonies and contributing your time and knowledge to the initiative's global cause. We are so grateful to you, dear friend, for hosting this event tonight, and I'm sure Vartan would want anyone else to do it. And I want to say thank you for all selection committee members, the laureates, and the staff who've been working in this event. And I think it's very critical that we are being together doing this all, and I'm so grateful with all these years we've been doing something which was very important for Vartan and for all of us. And I once again say thank you for supporting, and thank you, Darzi, to now chairing the selection committee. And I sure will continue doing this was done together with Vartan, because like Nubar said, I want to really confirm it was very important. It was Vartan being very important person to doing many projects in his life. But this is the unique project for him because he was co-founder of this project. He founded together with us, and for him it was very critical, but we will continue after he passed away. He knew about this was coming, and he said, Ruben, I want to be sure this will continue because the importance of Aurora, he found this was very important because not only was a humanitarian issue, but also he liked what we found the way how keep this global agenda with the connected with the Armenian world, because he was, let's say, David, if you excuse me, not the cosmopolitan, he was local. If I use the George Clooney word, he was global citizen with local identity, and he was proud to be American, but he always keeps Armenian roots. And I will never forget what with Diana and Vartan and Jenny, we visited Tatev Monastery in 2019, and he got the passport, and unfortunately he couldn't receive it yet before he passed away, and it was very sad that he couldn't get Armenian passport before he passed away. And the book was translated in Armenian finally. He was so happy. He spent so much time looking the translation of his book to Armenian. language, which was critical for him, how the young Armenian generation will read his story of life. So I believe our most important obligation to him will be continue what we've been doing and continue make the Aurora is one of the most important humanitarian initiatives in the world, and try to continue his heritage in building Aurora worldwide. And I want to wish all of us good health. And I would say for me personally, Vartan showed that trust is one of the critical elements of success. And if you trust person, everything is impossible, it can become possible. So I want to wish all of us, but we always trust the people around us, and we trust that everything is possible when you have a noble goal and you have the right people around you. And Vartan was very critical for all of us, but I'm sure he will stay in our life and will continue his work doing some other projects. Thank you again for everything that's been done, and thank you for the team for organizing this event. It was very emotional touch. And I hope to see all of you in Armenia in October in Aurora ceremony.
Thank you, Ruben, for your leadership, to Nubar, other co-founder, to all of the speakers who spoke with such emotion and power today in this celebration of the life of our friend, Vartan Gregorian. I'm sure that Vartan is watching over us with a smile, with a twinkle in his eye that we all remember, peaceful in the knowledge that the important work that the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative makes possible, that he believed in so passionately, continues across the world. Thank you to all of our wonderful speakers and participants. Thank you, viewers, for sharing with us these emotional moments. And thank you, Vartan, for being part of our lives. You made our world better. We will never forget you.